Have you ever stopped for a moment, just as you open your eyes in the morning, and asked yourself, how will today unfold? Will it be another day of exhaustion, routine, and chaos? Or could it begin with the calm and clarity of an emperor? This question is not just a poetic opening. It is an invitation. Before our feet even touch the floor, our minds are already racing. The day hasn't even started, and yet our hearts are heavy, our thoughts scattered. It feels as though life drags us forward before we even have a chance to breathe. But Marcus Aurelius had a different ritual, a private dialogue with himself. Each morning, he reminded his soul of a simple, almost sobering truth. Today I will meet selfish men, deceitful men, arrogant men, ungrateful men, aggressive men. It may sound harsh, but this was not pessimism. It was preparation. For Marcus understood something that modern psychology now confirms: our expectations shape our experience. When we expect the world to be flawless, kind, and cooperative, we are shattered the moment we encounter cruelty or betrayal. But when we remind ourselves calmly and clearly that life is full of challenges and flawed people, then we are not surprised. We are ready. And so the morning meditation of Marcus Aurelius was not about building false hope, but about cultivating resilience. He did not pray that the world would change. Instead, he prepared himself to meet the world as it is. Now, let us pause and reflect. How do you begin your mornings? Do you roll out of bed with a heavy sigh, already dreading the tasks ahead? Do you scroll endlessly through curated lives on Instagram or TikTok, comparing yourself with illusions of perfection? Do you rush through breakfast, coffee in one hand, phone in the other, your mind already consumed by the problems of yesterday and the anxieties of tomorrow? Or do you, like Marcus, take a brief but powerful moment to steady your mind, to remind yourself of the inevitabilities of life, and to anchor your spirit in something deeper than circumstance? This video is not about history for history's sake. It is not about memorizing a list of Stoic principles. It is about something far more practical: how the wisdom of a man who ruled Rome nearly 2 millennia ago can help you live with clarity, peace, and strength in a world that is louder, faster, and more demanding than ever. Marcus Aurelius is often remembered as the philosopher-king, but to truly appreciate what that means, we must remember the weight he carried. He was not simply a man who wrote beautiful words in a journal. He was a ruler of a vast empire, responsible for millions of lives, burdened by wars, betrayal, and the plague. He could have chosen cynicism, despair, or tyranny. Yet in the quiet hours of the morning, he returned again and again to the discipline of thought, to the calm strength of philosophy, to the gentle reminder that while he could not control the cruelty of others, he could always control his own response. And here is the truth that can transform your mornings. If Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, facing unimaginable challenges, could begin his day with calm reflection instead of frantic fear, then so can you. Imagine the difference it would make if you started tomorrow not with a flood of notifications, not with anxiety, not with exhaustion, but with a deep breath, a steady mind, and the calm acknowledgement: today will bring difficulties, but I will not be ruled by them. I will not surrender my peace to the chaos of others. This is the gift Marcus offers us across the centuries, a way to reclaim our mornings and through them, our lives. So stay with me, because in this video, we're going to journey together through the practices, the insights, and the timeless wisdom that can reshape the way you begin each day. And I promise you, if you stay until the end, you will never look at your mornings the same way again. You will see that the power to shape your day, your mood, and even your destiny begins not with the world around you, but with the thoughts you choose to entertain the moment you wake up. But before we dive deeper, let me ask one more thing. If you find value in this journey, if you believe that wisdom matters, and subscribe so you don't miss future explorations into philosophy, life, and meaning. And if you feel called to go one step further, consider using the super thanks feature on YouTube. Your support not only keeps this channel alive, but allows me to continue creating thoughtful, in-depth content that reaches and inspires more people around the world. So let's begin. Together, with Marcus Aurelius by our side, let's explore what it truly means to start the day not as a victim of circumstances, but as a philosopher, as a human being grounded in wisdom. And yes, arrogant men, ungrateful men, aggressive men. At first glance, it feels like a pessimistic way to begin the day, as if he was setting himself up to expect nothing but disappointment from humanity. But that interpretation misses the depth of his Stoic wisdom. Marcus was not indulging in negativity or cultivating cynicism. He was practicing what the Stoics called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. This was the practice of preparing one's mind for what is inevitable, not to wallow in despair. By telling himself at the start of each day that he would meet such people, he removed the element of shock. If betrayal came, he was not devastated. If arrogance confronted him, he was not surprised. If selfishness appeared, he was not offended. He was already ready. This principle resonates powerfully with modern psychology. Researchers in resilience and stress management often talk about the role of expectations. When people expect life to be smooth, every bump in the road feels like a crisis. But when people cultivate realistic expectations, when they understand that delays, disappointments, and betrayals are part of the human condition, they experience less emotional turbulence. In cognitive behavioral therapy, a similar technique is used, helping patients recognize and prepare for the negative patterns they will face so they can respond calmly rather than react impulsively. Marcus, centuries before modern therapy, was doing this on his own. Think about your own mornings. If you wake up assuming everything will go according to plan, how do you react when traffic makes you late, when your colleague undermines you, or when your friend forgets to return your call? Anger, frustration, and even despair can flood in. Then when those things occur, you simply nod. You already knew this was part of the landscape. Just as rain is part of the weather, so too are difficult people part of life. Yet Marcus's meditation was not only about others, it was about himself. In reminding himself of the flaws of others, he was also reminding himself of his responsibility not to join them. To say, "Today I will meet ungrateful men," is also to say, "But I will not let their ingratitude make me bitter. I will not let their selfishness make me selfish." This is the Stoic essence. Control what is within you, accept what is outside you. The selfish man does not rob you of your virtue unless you hand it over. The liar does not poison your soul unless you swallow the venom. Marcus was cultivating the inner fortress that Stoicism taught, a mind anchored in reason and virtue, untouchable by the storms of other people's behavior. There's a profound lesson here for modern life, especially in the digital age. Consider social media, where selfishness, deceit, arrogance, and aggression appear not just occasionally, but constantly. If you open Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube comments expecting only kindness, you will quickly find yourself disheartened. But if you remind yourself, as Marcus did, that the human condition inevitably expresses itself in these ways, then the insult, the trolling, the negativity, it loses its sting. You can observe it with detachment, maybe even compassion, rather than being consumed by it. Let's make this concrete with an example many people can relate to: the workplace. Suppose you have a colleague who constantly takes credit for ideas that are not theirs. The first time it happens, it hurts. The second time, it makes you angry. But if you begin your day by acknowledging to yourself, "I may encounter arrogance, I may encounter dishonesty," then when it happens, you already accounted for it. You can choose how to respond strategically rather than emotionally. Perhaps you document your contributions more clearly. Perhaps you confront the issue calmly, but you are not undone by it. The Stoic preparation transforms what could have ruined your day into something you were already mentally armored for. Or take another example, family gatherings. Most of us have that relative who always criticizes, who always finds something negative to say. If we walk in hoping for praise, we will be disappointed. If we walk in remembering Marcus's lesson that ungratefulness and arrogance are common, then their criticism does not destroy us. It is simply part of what we expected. We can still maintain warmth, still offer patience, without surrendering our peace. The deeper meaning of Marcus's reminder is that facing reality as it is liberates us. It sounds paradoxical. By expecting difficulty, we actually find peace. Why? Because peace does not come from the absence of struggle. It comes from the acceptance of struggle. If you expect life to be perfect, every imperfection shatters you. But if you expect imperfection, then you can remain whole. The Stoic approach is not about cold detachment or a lack of feeling. It is about grounding yourself so deeply in truth that no lie, no arrogance, no selfish act can unseat your equilibrium. We live in a culture that often tells us to think positive, to imagine that everything will go our way if only we affirm it strongly enough. But Marcus Aurelius knew better. He knew that optimism without realism is fragile. The moment reality breaks through, optimism shatters. Stoicism, by contrast, offers a sturdier foundation. It does not tell you to expect the best. It tells you to prepare for the worst, and in doing so, to be grateful for the best when it comes. If today you meet someone who is kind, generous, or grateful, it feels like a gift rather than a guarantee. By lowering your expectation of others, you paradoxically raise your capacity for joy, because kindness becomes a pleasant surprise rather than a basic entitlement. Think about how liberating that shift is. If you expect gratitude and don't receive it, you're bitter. If you expect ingratitude and instead receive gratitude, you're delighted. Marcus was training his mind to be delighted by goodness rather than entitled to it. That is why his practice is not negativity, but wisdom. There's another layer here. Marcus's reminder was not only about what he would encounter outside, but about the unity of humanity itself. He often wrote that those selfish, deceitful, arrogant men were not his enemies, but his brothers. They acted as they did out of ignorance, not true malice. He too, as a human, was capable of the same flaws. So in reminding himself of their faults, he also reminded himself to meet them with understanding. This again ties into modern psychological practices. Instead of labeling others as villains, we recognize that much of human misbehavior comes from pain, fear, or ignorance. The person who lies may be insecure. The person who boasts may be fragile inside. By preparing for their flaws, Marcus was also preparing to meet them with compassion. In everyday life, adopting this mindset can transform our relationships. If we see a rude cashier, we can remember, perhaps they're tired, perhaps life has pressed them hard. If we meet a reckless driver, we can remember, perhaps they are rushing to someone in need. This does not excuse the behavior, but it prevents us from poisoning our own hearts with resentment. Marcus's wisdom does not make cruelty vanish, but it makes our response humane and measured. So when Marcus Aurelius began his mornings with this sobering reminder, he was not bringing darkness into his day. He was bringing light, the light of realism, of resilience, of wisdom that frees us from surprise and anchors us in virtue. The Stoic morning is not about expecting joy, but about creating space for it by not being ruled by disappointment. And here is the paradox that makes his teaching so powerful. By starting the day expecting to meet selfishness and arrogance, Marcus actually increased his ability to notice kindness, humility, and gratitude. Because when good appeared, it shone more brightly against the background of expected difficulty. His heart, instead of being hardened, was softened by realism. His eyes, instead of being narrowed by bitterness, were opened wide by humility. This is the true meaning of beginning the day as a Stoic, not with naive hope, not with blind pessimism, but with calm preparation for the truth of life. In our own lives, embracing this mindset can be the difference between days ruined by others and days mastered by ourselves. It is the difference between reacting and responding, between being shocked into anger and choosing peace. To start the day like Marcus Aurelius is to say, I will not be naive, but I will not be bitter either. I will accept that life is flawed, that people are flawed, but I will not surrender my virtue to their flaws. I will live today with strength, with clarity, and with the unshakable calm that comes from facing the world as it is, not as I wish it to be. Picture a regular office on a Tuesday morning. The elevators open to the same carpeted hallway that always smells like coffee and toner. In the bullpen, someone has already claimed the quiet room for a Zoom call, and the Slack channels light up like a pinball machine. In this place, people don't wear togas or carry scrolls, but the human habits Marcus Aurelius described are alive and well. You can find selfishness in someone hoarding information to look indispensable. You can find gossip in the kitchen where a project post-mortem turns into character evaluation. You can find arrogance in the way a senior engineer dismisses a junior's idea before the sentence is finished. The names change, the hardware improves, the ancient patterns remain. Less surprised so you can act instead of react. Start with the simple acknowledgement that offices are built on competing incentives. People want recognition, teams want resources, departments fight for budget, individuals want promotions. Even in companies with good cultures, those incentives can twist behavior. The morning reminder, today I will meet selfishness, deceit, arrogance, ingratitude, aggression, is not an insult to your coworkers. It is a reality check for your nervous system. When you already expect a colleague to angle for credit or a manager to forget your contribution, your blood pressure doesn't spike when it happens. You stay available to your best self. That availability is everything. A person who is not surprised doesn't flail. They choose. Consider how this plays out when a project hits the political stage. Suppose two teams collaborated on a feature. Your group built the backend APIs. The partner group polished the UI. On launch day, the product lead praises the UI in all hands, shows a slick demo, and the backend work never gets mentioned. If you woke up expecting fairness, you feel erased. If you woke up expecting imperfection, you feel ready. The difference is not small. In the first case, you draft a passive-aggressive message or stew for hours, turning a slight into a story about your career. In the second case, you calmly post a follow-up thread that highlights performance metrics, links to the API docs, and thanks your teammates. You don't spike the ball, you put the ball where it belongs. When gratitude arrives later, it feels like a gift when it doesn't. Your day is not ruined. Now, take the more painful scenario, deliberate undermining. Let me tell you a story. We'll call her Elena. She's a capable analyst, careful with data, steady in meetings, good at translating numbers into decisions. Her team is preparing a quarterly review, and she has the key deck, the slides that frame the whole performance narrative. A colleague, Mark, is charming and quick. He's also competitive in a way that puts him on the wrong side of the line. 2 days before the presentation, Elena shares a draft for feedback. Mark replies with a few edits, and, without asking, forwards the draft to the director with his recommended changes, positioning himself as co-owner. In the live review, he leans forward, jumps in, and answers first. When the VP compliments the clear story, he says, "We were up late the last few nights polishing this. The we does a lot of work." After the meeting, people congratulate Mark in the hallway. If Elena didn't expect any of this, it's easy to see the outcome. Rage, a Slack rant to a friend. A curt message to Mark that becomes screenshotted company lore. Maybe she cries in her car or starts writing a resignation email in notes. This is the familiar path of surprise. But imagine Elena started her day with Marcus's ritual. She anticipated selfishness. She anticipated someone positioning. She anticipated that gratitude might be scarce. So she walked into the building with a calm body and a clear plan. Before sharing the draft, she embedded document history notes in the deck footer and saved a change log in the project channel. Not as a trap, just as adult hygiene. In the meeting, when Mark spoke fast, she didn't try to out-talk him. She waited for a pause, then anchored the narrative to outcomes only she could explain. How the retention analysis controlled for cohort seasonality, how the top-line number is stable while the LTV curve improved after a specific funnel change. She didn't interrupt, she illuminated. After the meeting, when the director thanked you guys, Elena replied in writing with a concise summary, adding links to the notebooks and queries she authored. No questions, no whining. Documentation is persuasion for grown-ups. Later that afternoon, Elena booked 10 minutes with Mark. Not to explode, she wasn't surprised. Remember, but to be specific. I appreciate your speed and your edits. When you forwarded the draft to the director and took point in the meeting, it blurred ownership. I need us to align on how we present contributions. I'm going to keep the change log in the channel. I'd like you to add your edits there going forward. If you want to lead a section, we'll call that out in the agenda ahead of time. Mark huffed and tried to joke, then promised to be more mindful. The next quarter, he followed the protocol half the time. That's reality. But here is what matters. Elena wasn't trapped in emotional debt to Mark's behavior. She behaved like the person she wanted to be whether or not Mark ever changed. That is Stoicism at work. If the behavior escalates, say, Mark keeps taking credit and starts undermining in private, Stoicism doesn't forbid escalation. It forbids impulsive escalation. You gather evidence. You request a triad meeting with the director. You frame the conversation in terms of process and outcomes, not personalities. You bring your logs, your tickets, your pull requests, your meeting notes. You ask for a clear division of ownership for the next cycle. You propose a single-threaded owner model with published responsibilities. If leadership won't engage, you make a private decision. Is this environment compatible with your values? If not, you explore internal transfers or external offers. None of this requires screaming. It requires clean thinking and steady energy, the kind you build by not being shocked when human beings act like human beings. Another common office stressor is gossip, small comments that shape reputations. You can be doing your job well and still get knocked around by a rumor that you're hard to work with or too intense. If you assume a culture will never gossip, you will always be blindsided. The Stoic move is to treat gossip like weather. It exists. You can't make it stop, but you can dress for it. Practically, that means being explicit with stakeholders instead of letting backchannel narratives define you. Send weekly updates with crisp bullets. What you shipped, what blocked you, what you're doing next. Use shared channels, not DMs, for significant decisions. When someone says, I heard you push back on X, you say, here's the thread. I flagged risk B and proposed mitigation C. We agreed to timeline D. You don't chase every whisper. You make whispers unnecessary. When someone tries to pull you into gossip, you redirect to actions. I can't speak to intent, but we need the migration plan. Here's a draft. It's amazing how much drama dissolves when you act like an adult in public. Stoicism also scales down to daily annoyances that, if unchecked, erode your patience to dust. The meeting that should have been an email, the colleague who always arrives 10 minutes late, then derails the agenda. The manager who drops a quick request at 5:58 p.m. The procurement portal that times out right before you submit. If your baseline expectation is that the workplace will be efficient and considerate, every friction feels like an insult. If your baseline expectation is that large groups produce friction, then frictions become just that, friction. You might still advocate for better processes, you should, but you won't burn 2 hours of life being mad at reality. The Stoic writes the agenda, sets time boxes, shares pre-reads, and ends the meeting on time. If the habitual latecomer shows up, you don't rehash. You say, we're on item 3. Notes are in the doc, and keep going. You're not cold. You're clear. Let's step outside the office and into the largest office in the world, the internet. Social media is the perfect laboratory for Marcus's morning reminder. Aggression, arrogance, and ingratitude are not exceptions online. They're the default in many threads. If you post anything, a tutorial, an opinion, a joke, people will tell you you're wrong, naive, cringe, or worse. If you expect applause, you'll quickly hate humanity. If you expect humans, you'll be fine. The first question is control. What is in yours? You can control what you post, how you phrase it, whether you fact check, whether you engage, and how long you engage. You cannot control whether a stranger 3 time zones away misreads your tone and decides you're wicked. Once you accept that, you can design rules for yourself that make you impossible to bait. A practical playbook helps. Pre-commit to response windows. For example, I never respond to a critical comment in less than 3 hours. That tiny delay removes adrenaline from your language and puts oxygen in your brain. Pre-commit to modes. Informative, curious. Write a minimal repro, add usage docs, include trade-offs, and specify supportive versions. If you did the process, the work is good by your standard, regardless of noise. If valid criticism appears someone shows a bug, a missing case that's a gift, you update the process to catch it next time. You don't melt because someone didn't like you. You improve because someone helped your craft. That reframing makes you anti-fragile. Every person watching this has met this selfish or deceitful one. Not once, many times. The manager who promises a raise and forgets. The friend who borrows money and goes silent. The ex who rewrites history to make you the villain. The contractor who bids low, then nickel and dimes every change order. The sibling who uses every family event as a stage. The gift of Marcus's practice is that it normalizes difficulty without normalizing harm. You manage expectations to preserve your energy. You set boundaries to preserve your dignity. Let's bring this down to a personal routine anyone can try. In the morning, before your phone, write 3 lines by hand. First, what I can't control today. List 3 items. Other people's opinions, the economy, your commute time. Second, what I can't control today. Your effort, your tone, your preparation. Third, what virtues matter today. Patience in the 10 a.m. Review, honesty in the status update. Courage in the 1:1 conversation you've been avoiding. That's it. 2 minutes. That pre-decision is the circuit breaker between stimulus and reaction. Midday, build micro-reset habits. After a tense meeting, walk to the water fountain, count 5 long exhales. When you expect people to be imperfect, you stop treating imperfection like a betrayal. You become more precise with language, more thoughtful with pushback, and more generous with grace where it's warranted. You also become less available to manipulation. Someone else's tantrum doesn't draft you into their script. You can say, I see you're upset. I'm willing to discuss the plan when we can speak calmly and mean it. You can say, I won't be spoken to that way, and end the call. Strength and softness are not opposites. They are the 2 hands of the same adult. There's a reason elite performers in different fields converge on similar mental models. Athletes visualize adversity before game time, the roar of the crowd, the bad call, the missed shot. Pilots train for engine failure and weather shifts. Doctors rehearse complications. None of them are negative thinkers. They are builders of calm. They want their first time meeting an emergency to be the second time in their mind. That is what Marcus was doing every morning with human behavior. He was modeling the day, including its frictions, so that when they arrived, he could still lead a continent-sized empire without losing his center. Your empire is smaller, maybe, but your nervous system doesn't know the difference. It reacts to a snide remark in a meeting the way it reacts to sudden thunder. You tame that reaction not by pretending thunder won't come, but by having a roof before the storm. The roof is the morning reminder. The walls are boundaries. The furniture is your process. The warmth is your values. People will still slam doors. You will still spill coffee. But you won't confuse weather with fate, and you won't hand your piece to the loudest person in the room. It's tempting in a noisy world to swing between naive optimism and bitter cynicism. Stoicism is the boring third option, the one that actually works. Expect friction. Prepare your response. Meet selfishness without becoming selfish. Meet deceit without becoming dishonest. But Marcus was not the first Stoic, nor was he the only voice that gave this philosophy its shape. To understand why his morning reflections matter, it helps to bring in 2 other key figures, Seneca and Epictetus, whose teachings complete the triangle of Roman Stoicism. Seneca was the statesman and playwright, writing letters to his younger friend Lucilius about how to live wisely in the middle of wealth, politics, and eventual exile. Epictetus was the former slave who became a teacher of immense influence, insisting that no one could ever chain the mind unless it consented. And Marcus, the emperor, ruled the greatest empire of his day with their words as his compass. Together, they remind us that Stoicism is not a single man's habit, but a way of approaching life that transcends social class, profession, or station. A slave, a senator. Seneca wrote that fortune can take away possessions, honors, even health, but it cannot touch virtue. Epictetus drilled his students with a distinction between what is up to us and what is not up to us. Marcus reminded himself each morning that the behavior of others was beyond his command, but his own character remained his responsibility. This is why the philosophy endures. It is simple to grasp, but endlessly difficult to practice, and it does not require perfect conditions to work. It only requires the willingness to look inward. To make this concrete, Stoics developed exercises, mental habits that anyone could practice daily. One of the most powerful is journaling. Seneca often framed his letters as both advice to a friend and a diary to himself, a way of examining how he lived that day, where he failed, and how he might improve. Marcus's Meditations is essentially a journal, never meant for publication, where he argues with himself, reminds himself of truths he already knew, and grounds himself for the trials ahead. The act of writing clarifies what is vague, forces the mind to slow down, and reveals patterns in our thinking. In modern terms, journaling is not just reflection, but cognitive restructuring. It lets you notice automatic reactions and reframe them. For someone in today's world, a third exercise is negative visualization, sometimes called premeditatio malorum, which Marcus practiced each morning. It is the act of imagining the difficulties you might face, not obsessively, but as rehearsal. Imagine losing your job. Imagine your flight canceled. Imagine someone betraying you. By walking through those scenarios in your mind, you prepare yourself emotionally. People will bump into you, but none of it needs to rob you of your composure if you expected it. Marcus reminded himself every morning that arrogance, selfishness. It is easy to fantasize that everything will go smoothly, that the client will be impressed, that they will agree to every proposal, that they will sign without hesitation. But the Stoic approach asks me to imagine the opposite. The client is skeptical, they interrupt, they point out flaws, they reject half the plan. If I walk in expecting applause, I crumble at the first frown. If I walk in expecting resistance, I am ready to respond calmly, to ask clarifying questions, to adjust. The meeting might still be hard, but I am not destroyed by it. Similarly, when starting a project, it is tempting to assume that deadlines will hold, teammates will deliver, and the budget will remain stable. But projects fail. People get sick. I can regroup. These practices are not about pessimism. They are about realism. In fact, they increase joy because they increase gratitude. If I rehearse losing a client, and then the client signs happily, I am thrilled. If I rehearse a project falling apart, and it succeeds, I am doubly grateful. By expecting less from fortune, he reduces the sting when it actually arrives. Stoicism also has a countercultural lesson. Do not tie your happiness to things outside your control. Epictetus made this stark. When you go to the baths, expect to be splashed, jostled, insulted. If you can't handle that, don't go. When you love someone, remember they are mortal. When you shoot for a role, remember the decision is not yours alone. This sounds harsh, but it is liberating. When you realize you can control only your thoughts, your actions, your choices, you stop burning energy on what is outside your reach. You stop screaming at traffic because traffic does not obey you. You stop resenting weather because weather does not consult you. You stop being broken by another's ingratitude because gratitude is not under your command. What remains under your command is your response. Patience or anger, courage or fear, honesty or deceit. This control is small, but it is everything. I have lived both ways, expecting the world to comply with me and accepting that it won't. The first way is exhausting. Every delay feels like an injustice. Every mistake by someone else feels like sabotage. The second way is calmer. I still act to improve things. I argue for better timelines. I push for quality, but my heart is not chained to outcomes. When a project fails, I grieve, but I do not collapse. When a client storms out, I breathe, I document, I try again. The freedom comes from recognizing that while the externals matter, they are not mine to control. My reaction, my integrity, my choices, that is mine. This is why Stoicism is so often misunderstood. People think it means suppressing emotions, being cold or detached. But Seneca cried when his friend died. Marcus grieved for his children. Epictetus spoke with compassion. The difference is that they did not let those emotions rule their reason. They felt, but they did not drown. They acknowledged pain, but they did not curse fate. They accepted the limits of control. And within those limits, they lived as well as possible. In daily life, this can look small but feels profound. A rude email arrives. You can snap back, escalate, and poison the relationship. You are joyful, and when it is blocked, you are calm. Nothing about the road changed, only your preparation did. This is why Marcus began each morning with reminders of difficulty. He was not darkening his day. He was brightening it by stealing the power of surprise. For me, the lesson that rings loudest is that we spend most of our lives trying to bend the external world, when in reality, the only durable power is bending ourselves. That does not mean giving up, resigning, or becoming passive. Stoics were active in politics, law, war, teaching. It means acting with clear eyes. Do your best, but do not chain your soul to the result. Seneca wrote, "We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more in imagination than in reality." Negative visualization might feel odd at first, but it inoculates you against the shocks that cripple others. This is training for the soul, no less important than training for the body. What I have found is that when I practice even lightly, I am steadier in crises. When a client lashes out, I don't dissolve, I anchor. When a project derails, I don't despair, I regroup. When someone betrays me, I don't like it, but I am not destroyed. And when fortune smiles, I am grateful because I know it was never guaranteed. This gratitude makes success sweeter because it is not owed to me, it is given. That is the Stoic paradox. By expecting less, you enjoy more. By preparing for difficulty, you find peace. By releasing control over externals, you gain control over yourself. Seneca, Epictetus, Marcus, they lived in different circumstances, but all reached this same truth. And if they could find calm amid exile, slavery, and empire, then surely we can find calm amid meetings, emails, and crowded subways. Stoicism does not remove pain. The context was extreme, but the practice was simple. Prepare your mind for what the day will bring, so that you can face it without surprise. When we compare that to our world, the scale is different, but the principle is the same. Modern leaders, whether CEOs navigating global markets, politicians managing crises, or parents raising children, are not leading armies across frozen rivers, but they wake up to their own battles. A CEO might begin the day knowing shareholders will be angry, employees anxious, competitors aggressive. A politician wakes up to headlines accusing them of corruption or incompetence. A parent wakes up knowing their child will resist getting dressed for school, spill juice on the floor, or throw a tantrum in the car. The stakes vary, but the truth is universal. If you expect the day to be free of friction, you are already defeated. If you prepare, you can move through it with composure. Marcus had to steel himself before facing senators with daggers in their smiles. A modern CEO steels themselves before facing a board meeting where every financial misstep will be magnified. A mother steels herself before facing a morning rush of backpacks, breakfast, and traffic. All are leaders, all are tested, all need the same habit of preparing the mind before the battle begins. History gives us dramatic examples, but daily life gives us the relatable ones. Imagine you start your day by opening your email, and the very first message is negative. Perhaps it's a client furious about a missed deadline. Perhaps it's your boss disappointed in your report. Perhaps it's just a passive-aggressive note from a colleague pointing out mistakes. If you were expecting a smooth, easy morning, that one email can infect the entire day. Your mood darkens. Your interactions with others carry the weight of that first blow, and everything seems harder. But if you woke up like Marcus did, telling yourself, "Today, I will meet selfishness, anger, arrogance," and cries about homework. If the parent expects cooperation, they explode in frustration. But if the parent tells themselves ahead of time, "My child will resist, they will test me, they will be slow," then the resistance is not a betrayal, it's part of the job. The parent breathes, guides, repeats instructions calmly, and somehow gets everyone into the car. It's not perfect, but it's steady. Marcus prepared for betrayal and arrogance. Parents prepare for whining and messes. The pattern is the same. Preparing for difficulty makes you patient, while expecting ease makes you brittle. Drivers know the same lesson. A commuter who expects a smooth ride will curse every red light, every slow truck, every honking horn. The stress builds, and by the time they arrive at work, they're already angry. Another commuter who tells themselves, "I will hit traffic, I will be cut off, I will be delayed," is calm when those things happen. They turn on a podcast, they breathe, they accept that this is simply the texture of driving. The same road produces rage in one person and calm in another. The difference is expectation. Marcus Aurelius faced rebellions and plagues. We face traffic jams. The scale is different. The strategy is the same. Doctors practice this stoicism every day. Imagine a physician walking into a hospital knowing they will see patients who are frightened, uncooperative, or even hostile. If they expect gratitude and kindness from everyone, they will burn out in a week. But if they prepare themselves knowing that suffering makes people irritable, that fear makes them lash out, then they can meet rudeness with compassion. The patient who snaps, "You don't care about me," does not destroy the doctor's peace. The doctor hears the pain beneath the words, treats the symptoms, and stays steady. Imagine a CEO who shares a new strategic vision with their executive team. Everyone nods, but later, one executive leaks doubts to the press or undermines the plan in side conversations. The client calmed down, and the project continued. Had I reacted with anger, the relationship might have collapsed. The only difference was expectation. Preparation gave me space to choose. But the principle is unchanged. Every leader, whether a head of state, a CEO, or a parent, needs to prepare for the morning. Every worker, driver, and doctor needs to remind themselves, "Today I will meet selfishness, arrogance, and gratitude." And every one of us needs to remember that by preparing for these things, we don't make the world worse. We make ourselves steadier. The real power of these examples is that they show how ordinary life becomes extraordinary with the right mindset. A parent who keeps calm in the morning rush, a driver who arrives without rage, a doctor who treats patients with compassion, a worker who replies with clarity instead of venom. These are the true heirs of Marcus Aurelius. They may not write in Latin or rule an empire, but they embody the same philosophy. They prove that Stoicism is not ancient theory, but living practice. And that practice begins, as Marcus taught, with a simple morning reminder. Expect the world as it is, not as you wish it to be, and meet it with the strength of your own response. The deeper lesson that comes out of Marcus Aurelius's reflections is that the way we begin our mornings is not about chasing after fragile hopes, but about fortifying ourselves for reality. We don't start the day by imagining that everything will go perfectly, because that fantasy will collapse the moment reality arrives. We begin with preparation. Preparation does not make us cold or pessimistic. It makes us steady, resilient, and capable of gratitude when good things do appear. The simple but powerful truth is that by bracing for the world as it is, we unlock the ability to live fully within it. Marcus reminded himself constantly that his dignity, his integrity, his moral character could not be stolen by anyone else's behavior. He wrote that if he preserved his honor, then no man could truly harm him. The world could betray, insult, and wound, But the core of the self, what he called the ruling principle, remained untouchable unless he surrendered it. That is why he insisted on preparing for selfishness, arrogance, and ingratitude. Not to wallow in bitterness, but to build a shield around his character. If he met cruelty with cruelty, then he had already lost. If he met deceit with deceit, then he had abandoned himself. Because when the rude email comes, or the traffic jams, or the argument at work, you are not surprised. You are not dragged under by the current. You are standing ready calm. This is not wishful thinking. This is practical wisdom. I have tried this exercise myself, and I know its effect. On mornings when I wake and immediately scroll through social media, I feel scattered before the day begins. But on mornings when I take even 5 minutes to remind myself that difficulty is inevitable and that my response is my own, I feel anchored. If the foundation is poured with realism and preparation, then storms may come, but the house still stands. Marcus built his mornings like a builder laying stone after stone. Expectation of difficulty, commitment to virtue, clarity of control. Over time, that daily discipline made him capable of ruling an empire without losing his humanity. Over time, that same discipline can make us capable of ruling our own smaller empires or families, our careers, our inner lives without surrendering our dignity. And this is where the invitation to you becomes very practical. Take 5 minutes tomorrow morning. Sit quietly before you open your laptop, before you check your phone. Remind yourself, like Marcus did, that today you will encounter people who may be rude, selfish, arrogant, ungrateful, or dishonest. Remind yourself that these are not exceptions. They are part of life. Then remind yourself of the second truth. You are not defined by those encounters. You can remain patient, honest, and kind. You can keep your dignity. Write down what kind of difficulties you expect and what kind of person you choose to be in response. And when you come back at the end of the day, see the difference it makes. Then repeat it the next day. Let the habit grow until it becomes part of who you are. That is the way to live with dignity in a world that often forgets what dignity even means. If you found this journey meaningful, I encourage you to support this channel. Like this video, so more people can find it. Share it with someone who might need a reminder to begin their mornings with preparation rather than illusion. Subscribe so you don't miss future explorations of philosophy and its relevance to everyday life. And if you want to go even further, consider showing support through the Super Thanks feature here on YouTube. Every gesture of support helps keep this work alive and helps spread wisdom that our noisy world desperately needs. Where philosophy isn't locked in dusty books, but lived out in daily practice. Together, we can carry forward his reminder, no matter what the world throws at us, if we keep our integrity.